Welcome, Chris.
Welcome, Chris.
Hey, Zayda.
Now on to kind of candidates for state auditor. So you know both of us by now, but again, kind of Jonathan Cohn.
Zayda Ortiz.
And then I'll turn it over to you in one sec. We'll start off with the question that you're used to answering on the trail. Just like take 2 minutes, tell us who you are and why you're running.
Well, first of all, thanks for having me. Thank you for conducting this rigorous process. And it is great to see so many familiar faces and friends on the call today. I'm Chris Dempsey. I'm running to be your next state auditor. And I'm running as the son of public school teachers. My parents met while teaching at the Martin Luther King School in Boston in 1970. And I saw them throughout the course of my childhood digging into their own pockets to pay for school supplies for their students, as we know teachers across the Commonwealth do to this day. I'm running as someone who is proud to be from Massachusetts and who is proud to have chosen Massachusetts. But I know that we have fallen behind on everything from transportation to racial equality. And I'm running because I have seen firsthand that when decisions in state government are made with a lack of accountability, when those decisions are made without public input and without transparency, that those decisions benefit people who are well connected on Beacon Hill, but they don't benefit families like mine and like yours and the people we've met on this campaign trail from Pittsfield to Provincetown. So that's why I'm running. And I've got real conviction about the importance of this office and its ability to make the Commonwealth a more fair and a more equitable place for all of us.
Thanks, Chris. I appreciate you and everything you're doing so far. You're here. Welcome with Progressive Mass. And what my first question is what does progressive mean to you? And what do you see specifically as the obstacles that help us from achieving and staying where we were, once were as a proud progressive state?
Zayda, there's, I think, an infinite number of ways to define progressive. I'm going to choose one of my favorites, not maybe the only way to describe it, but it's a Senator Paul Wellstone quote, which is that we all do better when we all do better. And I don't know if that's on anybody's bingo card today, but I hope that if it is, they're crossing that off right now. Look, I believe firmly and strongly in government being a robust force for good in people's lives, in basic values like investing in public education and in public health, so that everyone across the Commonwealth, no matter what town they live in, no matter what zip code they live in, has an opportunity to thrive and to grow and succeed and live the life that makes them happy, and where they feel supported and able to do what they want to do. And again, that's just one definition of progressive. There are many, but that's one that I like. And I think when we achieve that for everyone, we achieve a better world and a better and stronger Commonwealth for all of us.
Great, thank you. And so kind of thinking about the office itself, so the state auditor does not make law, kind of him or herself, but uncovers problems that sometimes require either legislative or regulatory action to fix them. So kind of what audits would you prioritize and how would you make sure that any necessary follow-up actions are taken and codified into law if necessary?
Yeah, John, what you're getting at here is the power of the auditor's office is relatively limited in a direct sense, but I think it's very strong and powerful in an indirect sense. You have a bully pulpit as one of just 6 officials elected statewide to work for the people of the Commonwealth. And we are proud to have been the first campaign in this race to put out a policy paper of any kind. In fact, we put out the first 3. And I don't think we have time to go into the details of all of them, but I'll just name them. And I'm glad if there's a follow-up question to go into more detail. The first is on federal stimulus dollars. The second was on climate and environmental justice. And the third was on reform of the Massachusetts State Police. And I think those 3 issues show the breadth of opportunity within this office. You can focus on generational investments. You can focus on the urgent need to address the climate crisis. And you can focus on particular state institutions that we know need more accountability and more reform on Beacon Hill. I've been effective at building a platform, along with many of you in some cases, to have an impact on the public policy debate in Massachusetts and where we end up as a Commonwealth. And I've been very proud of doing that in many cases with limited resources. This is an office that has a significant set of resources in 200 people and a $20 million a year budget to have a substantial impact on the conversation that we are having as a Commonwealth to have a brighter and more equitable future. So I think I've proven I can do that, and I want to do more of that work for all of us in the Commonwealth.
Thanks, Chris. I appreciate that. So the auditor plays a role in improving transparency in our state government, but the availability of that information is only part of the story. People need to be able to see it and be able to use it. How would you make sure a report doesn't just sit on a shelf gathering dust?
So I'm guessing very few people on this call or who are watching the recording have the auditor's office as the homepage of their web browser. If anyone does, I suspect it's Jonathan Cohn, but I don't know.
He put it on my radar. I won't lie. He put it on my radar.
I very much appreciate that this is an office that is seen at times as sleepy and dusty, and that doesn't have the impact that it could have by being that robust advocate for change within state government. So we need to meet people where they are. We need to work through the traditional media, through social media. We absolutely need to have our information available in multiple languages. And it can't just be on the web. It also has to be in physical locations, in public libraries, in schools, in universities. But I think you'll also see, Zayda, that, and I hope that I have earned maybe this reputation, that I am someone who is going to be out there participating forcefully in the public debate. Now, I want to say that I don't think that Massachusetts residents are looking to elect just another politician that has a lot of opinions about things. I think that the power of this office comes from the work that the auditor's team does, using that work to inform and establish perspectives, and then doing the advocacy built on that work with the facts and the data on our side. But when we have that facts and data on our side, just as we did with No Boston Olympics, we can be powerful, powerful advocates together. And I want to be the tip of that spear.
Great, thank you. And so to get to kind of a specific issue, so Massachusetts as a coastal state will be disproportionately hit by the impacts of climate change. What role do you see in the office for strengthening our response to the climate crisis, like in strengthening the state's response to the climate crisis?
You heard me say in the earlier answer that it was our second policy paper was climate and environmental justice. I am incredibly proud of the vision that we have put out of how the auditor's office can become, and will be under my leadership, a national leader on climate. We will make the office the first in the country to incorporate carbon accounting into our audits of state agencies, to hold those agencies accountable for the very good laws that are on the books that require them to reduce emissions. We will also create an Auditor's Commission on Environmental Justice, so that people and communities across Massachusetts, whether they live along a polluting highway in Somerville, whether they live near a peaker power plant in Pittsfield that turns on at the periods of high electricity demand but produces some of the dirtiest energy, whether they live in a flooded area or an area prone to flooding, or an area in a rural community where when their bridge washes out because of severe weather, that they might have to detour 20 miles to get to the grocery store. All of those people are on the front lines of the climate crisis, and they deserve a seat at the table on Beacon Hill. They will have that when I'm auditor, and it's not going to take months and years to appoint those people to that commission in the way that it has for Governor Baker to do his environmental justice appointments. I promise you with carbon accounting that we will be the first in the country to adopt this, but we will not be the last. And that is how we win on climate. We can't just focus on getting emissions to zero in Massachusetts, although we should. We also have to have a leadership role with other states. And we will, again, make this office a national leader on climate through that carbon accounting process. And I'm really proud of the reaction and reception we've gotten to that idea.
Great, thank you. So Massachusetts is one of the most prosperous states in America, but we are also deeply rooted in racial and economic inequalities. What do you think you could do in your office to address these divides?
Zayda, there's so much we can do. And I want to be very clear that so many of these issues are structural. I have seen that in transportation, where you can draw a direct line. You can compare the maps to each other between the communities, the neighborhoods in Chelsea that were redlined in the 1930s to where we built highways in the 1940s and early 50s, including demolishing Union Square Park in Chelsea to build an off-ramp for Route 1, to where the worst air pollution in the state is today and where some of the worst public health outcomes are in the state today. There is a direct line between those three things. Those are structural issues, and it's exactly the kind of structural thinking and approach and research that we can do in the auditor's office. Again, this is not an office that has always been the highest profile office, but it has that ability to dig in, to assess those structural issues and make recommendations. And I'll give you just one example that's maybe more specific here. As part of our proposal on tracking the federal stimulus dollars, we are proposing to adopt many of the recommendations of the Racial Equity Scorecard, which was developed by the Black Economic Council of Massachusetts, the Mass Public Health Association, the NAACP, and other organizations. And we want to make sure that we are measuring, not just did we fix the bridge or did we upgrade the dam or install a new broadband, but did those investments actually improve broader equity in our state? Did we reduce that racial inequality? Did we improve public health outcomes? We can measure that in the auditor's office, and we can be that platform for informing and educating the public about what's working and what's not working and what needs to change.
Great, okay, thank you. And what I get at, one thing that kind of gets to a kind of a tension that exists within the office of the auditor itself. So as like what I'm kind of, and one thing that I've come across when dealing with kind of election-related work. So one thing that, as you noted kind of in your questionnaire when expressing support for some voting reforms, that there's also funding that needs to be attached to really help people implement laws. So there's often a tension that I've seen with the Office of Unfunded Mandate, like when discourse around unfunded mandates on the state level, where it's both, one, often true that the legislature is not providing specific funding for things, and at the same time, the discourse of unfunded mandates can be used by those locally who don't want to do the thing itself. So I'd be curious to see how you would navigate kind of that balance in the office, where it's both, there are specific things that the legislature needs to fund, while not having the discourse of it not being not funded end up helping those who don't actually want the thing itself. If that question makes
Jonathan, that question makes perfect sense. It's a real challenge in this office. And I think it's exactly why we need a next state auditor that has a proven track record of progressive values and not a mixed record on those votes in that history. Because you have to walk that fine line. You have to, in your example of voting access, you have to make sure that we are not using that discourse around the cost to cities and towns as an excuse to not expand voting rights and make voting as easy as possible for people across Massachusetts. So I don't have a magic wand there. All I have is a commitment that I am going to do my best to do that, to always have those values in place and to hold them and to let those be the sort of North Star, so to speak, of this work. It is a built-in tension in the office. Nobody is going to get it perfect. Anyone that says they are going to get it perfect doesn't have, I think, the right perspective on how challenging that can be. But you've got my commitment to work on it and to be a partner and to try to get us to that better place, acknowledging that there is that existing tension.
Great. So how would you differ from your predecessor in the office? And this can be kind of a two-part question. And what is one innovation from someone holding your office anywhere across the country, or your predecessor as well, would you like to implement and bring to Massachusetts?
So I have great respect for Auditor Bump. She and I were colleagues together in the Patrick administration. It does not mean that I agree with every decision that she has made or all the work that her office has done in her tenure. But I do think that she should be applauded for her many decades of public service to the Commonwealth. Even she said in her statement about not running for re-election in May of last year that she was excited to see what the next generation could do with the powers of this office. And she acknowledged that she believes there is some untapped potential, that there is an ability to make this office a more robust force for good within state government. As you heard me say earlier, I'm a person that has been proud to have built some platforms where we didn't have an audience, we didn't have standing in the debate at first, and we built it for ourselves with good facts and good data and good organizing. And I want to take that skill set to this office. I think people will see a change and a difference in the profile of the office and the way in which the auditor is engaging in public policy debates in Massachusetts. There's a great set of auditors around the country. About half are elected and about half are appointed, but we've got strong Democrats You can look at Auditor Keller in New Mexico, who focused on public corruption and used it as an opportunity to point out where there was fraud and abuse happening in the system, and played a very complementary role to an attorney general in that role. You can look at Auditor Di Pasquale in Pennsylvania, who was one of the first in the country to raise the question of climate in auditing. He didn't go so far as to introduce carbon accounting, but I would build on his attention to that issue. So I think there are a lot of examples out there. And again, not the highest profile office in the land, but a real opportunity to make the Commonwealth more fair and more equitable.
Great, thank you. And one question that we've had on the queue, but I don't think we've used yet today is, who are your political role models and why?
That's a good question. I don't know that I've had that on the campaign trail before. I'm going to say two folks here. One is Governor Deval Patrick, for whom I had the honor of working in 2006. He ran a true grassroots campaign, and I believe he is a person who tried to use, not always as effectively as we would have liked, but tried to use that grassroots energy to create better outcomes for all of us in Massachusetts. And that's a hard thing to do. But I think he was a true believer in grassroots organizing and campaigns. And in some ways, although I know this will be a tough comparison because it was a very different time and it's a different office, but his campaign is a model for our campaign in this work. It reminded me of the power of the grassroots, and I took those lessons onto opportunities and work like No Boston Olympics. The other person that I have to mention, of course, is Governor Dukakis. I was 6 years old and up on my dad's shoulders on election night in 1988, outside of Governor Dukakis's house on Perry Street, really excited that he was going to win the presidency, and then having to be kind of let down and disappointed by my dad that wasn't actually going to happen. But Governor Dukakis is a role model for me, and I think in particular, I'm proud to say that I will be the first statewide elected official to commute to Beacon Hill by transit since Mike Dukakis left office in 1991. It has been 30 years since we've had a statewide elected official commute by transit. I will do that. And anyone who knows me well knows that is not a campaign gimmick. That is just who I am. I'm a person who rides transit. I take the Green Line, the 66 bus, the 1, the 39, you name it, I take it. And that's how I'm going to get to work. And I think it's important that we have leaders that care about public transit and actually use the service and not just talk about it.
Great, great. So we're moving to our lightning round. What was your favorite binge during COVID? That was an interesting time. I was living with my then girlfriend, now fiance, in 450 square feet. So we once we got through the pandemic, we knew that we were a good fit for each other in those early days of the pandemic. Make or break time for sure.
Yes, it was. So we watched. Is it called Trial 4? Which is the story of Sean, and I'm blanking on his last name. I'm sorry, Sean Ellis. Sean Ellis, who was a wrongfully convicted Black man of the murder of a police officer in the early 1990s. Yeah. That was a powerful story, a story of redemption, a story of truth finally coming through after far too long, and an inspiring story for me. And I've had a chance not to meet Sean, but to meet some people who are sort of involved in that story. And I think it's something that we can be proud of, that we eventually got to the right outcome, but something that we need to recognize is not just a 1990s story, that injustice is happening today. And we need reform of our criminal justice system to avoid sending innocent people to jail.
Great, and then I'm going to do one that I've asked before, and I'm going to take an idea of a question that somebody had messaged to me kind of in the chat. So as we've been asking folks before, your favorite spot to recharge in Massachusetts, kind of if you're looking to go somewhere, and I'll adapt a question somebody sent me, kind of where do you get your news? since that's always an interesting thing when thinking about who's going to represent us, what kind of newspapers, magazines, or podcasts do you subscribe to?
Yeah. So I'm someone who recharges by exercising. It's very good at clearing my head. And if I don't exercise, I'm not in the best mental health. So I'll go for a run or a bike ride, and I'll either go for a run around Jamaica Pond, or if I'm going for a bike ride, I love to bike along the Esplanade. And in fact, I was in the green room with Caroline Bays earlier, and we were talking about biking out to Watertown. And she said the best place in Watertown to talk to voters is the CVS in Watertown Square, which is also where I buy Powerade when I'm halfway done with my bike ride. So I'm familiar with that CVS. So I'd say the Esplanade for recharging. And then where do I get my news? I'm someone who grew up with the Boston Globe being delivered to my house every day. It's still, I think, a vital news source in Massachusetts. I read the Times. I use the Brookline Libraries. I'm pretty thrifty, so I use the Brookline Library's free New York Times account that you have to like go back and log into differently every 3 days. But I use that for the Times. And then local news in places like Patch, local papers. And look, the reality is, and maybe I should be embarrassed to say this, but I do scroll through Twitter and click on a lot of stuff there too. But as one of the 10 people on Twitter, I guess I just have to acknowledge and accept that.
You're one of the creatures on Twitter. It's true. We all are. We all are. And so lastly, who should play you in the movie?
Who should play me in the movie? I think we should be wondering, when they make the movie about Boston 2024, who's going to play Jonathan Cohn? I think is maybe the more interesting question. So I have not been asked this yet either on the campaign trail. I guess
we aim to be different.
So I'm gonna go with John Krasinski. And the reason why, in addition to being like a white guy with dark hair, I guess, is that my mom taught John Krasinski math at Newton South High School. And I think he was maybe 3 or 4 years older than me. But yeah, as I said, my parents are public school teachers, and that's one of my mom is very proud of him. Sometimes in a way that makes me a little bit jealous and envious, like he was like the older brother that did better than me or something. I don't think he uses his math skills that much, probably in his job, but she's still proud of that. So let's see if he's willing to do it.
And then to close, after you talk with a voter, how would you want them to describe you in one sentence?
That Chris is someone who we can trust, who is going to follow the facts, and is going to make decisions that are in the best interest of me and my family and of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. If you can drop in the chat if people want to find out more about you and your campaign, where they should go. And again, yeah, thank you for taking some time in the afternoon to chat with us.
Yes, enjoy your afternoon, Chris.
Thanks so much, everybody. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk with you all. Thank you.